We're joined now by criminal defense attorney Bernarda Villalona. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So Eric and Lyle Menendez have been in prison now for more than 30 years. And during that time, how would you say the attitude towards allegations of sexual abuse changed, especially within the legal system?
So the allegations of sexual abuse, I think the mind frame has changed for people. Times have changed because now people are more willing to accept that males and boys can be sexually abused because now it's coming out into the light. So it's more acceptable in the sense that they can accept an allegation like that. Back in the 80s and early 90s, it wasn't something that could be accepted. I think if it would have been like female defendants that were on trial and they were claiming that they were sexually abused by their father, that was more accepting than to hear males or boys being sexually abused by another male.
And the new evidence that's being cited gives corroboration to the fact that they may or have been sexually assaulted. How strong a case do you think the brothers have in light of it?
So I think this new piece of evidence is huge for the Menendez brothers because you have to think during the first and second trial, they didn't have corroboration of being sexually abused by their father. All they had was the testimony that they offered to the jury. But I think this 3-page letter that was penned by Eric Menendez when he was young, and this was months before the murders actually took place, and he penned this letter to his cousin where he says that he is scared of his father, that he doesn't know when it's going to happen again, that this is a crucial piece of evidence that would have corroborated their testimony back then. Interestingly enough, if the prosecution had this evidence, my question would be, would they have charged the case differently? Would they still have gone forward with the murder charges, or whether they would simply have gone forward with the manslaughter charges? Because the manslaughter charges would have given them a maximum sentence of 21 or 22 years in the state of California.
So given that they had life in prison as a sentence, how does this resentencing process take place?
So there's several options that can take place on November 26th or before then if the prosecution decides to consent to any type of resentencing or release. Either one, the judge can grant the habeas corpus and actually release them, or number two, he can grant that a new trial is warranted in this case, or number three, the prosecution can agree and recommend a resentence to take place, and a resentencing could be the time served since they have been in custody for 30 years. The lead prosecutor has already said that in California, he has resentenced about 300 defendants, and that out of those 300 defendants that he found that only 4 of those have reoffended, and that the Menendez brothers, since they served 30 years, that they have paid their debt to society. So I think that would be more warranted and coming from the prosecution because it will streamline the process instead of entering another evidentiary trial or hearing.
Now, you mentioned the November court date. How does the timeline on all of these various scenarios play out?
So that's why the resentencing, if that is what the prosecutor deems that is what is warranted, it will streamline the process where if the Menendez brothers are resentenced and it's resentenced to the time that they've already served of those 30 years, they can be released as early as that very same day of that hearing. But if there's a habeas corpus or a hearing that's actually granted or a new trial, that's going to delay any type of release. Now, if there's a resentence, it's important to remember that does not vacate the murder convictions. All the prosecution is saying is that they're resentencing on them on the penalty for what they have been found guilty of.
That's fascinating. Bernarda Villalona, thanks so much for joining us. Now, just to clarify, Lyle and Eric's cousin did corroborate the abuse in their first trial. She testified that Lyle confided in her about the alleged sexual abuse in 1976, but that trial ended in a mistrial, and she did not testify in the second one, which ultimately led to their conviction.